So if you feel like Flexbox is still a bit of a mystery, go and watch these next two videos for a deeper understanding. If not, go ahead and jump a couple lectures to continue building To-Do Master. Before we go any further building To-Do Master though, I feel like it would be very useful to explain in further detail the background, basics, and terminology of Flexbox. After all, Flexbox determines our styling within React Native, so to get confident really building our own applications and structures, we'll need a deeper understanding of how it works. First off, let's explain why it's called Flexbox. The idea is that everything in a website or application in the modern day needs to be adaptable or flexible to different screen sizes and dimensions. After all, not everyone has the same phone or computer. Simply hard-coding every pixel position, margin, or padding won't do. So as a solution, Flexbox looks at your application as a series of components, or items, within a container. These items will expand to fill free spaces or shrink to prevent from extending beyond edges. Also, Flexbox doesn't depend on a specific direction, which is especially helpful in reorganizing layouts when it comes to changes in orientation and size. We'll discuss why and how it doesn't depend on a specific direction in just a minute, but first, let's break down Flexbox containers. To do so, let's return back to To-Do Master and start experimenting with the structure. So here I have my code editor, and then I have my application. So every container within Flexbox has a flex property, this one right here within our container, which is a number that essentially determines how wide or long a component should stretch within its parent. By default, we give the first component a flex of 1 because we want it to expand to the entire container. Let's illustrate the flex in action by giving this container a border. So this will just help give a visual output of what the actual flex looks like. So let's say the border width is 3 and the border color is green. As you can see by the green border, this flex of 1 as a single item in our screen expands across the whole application. Now to solidify this idea of flexing, let's add items or children to our container to see Flexbox rendering 2 items next to each other. So let's delete the To-Do Master text. We'll also delete this align items and justify content. And don't worry, we'll explain those 2 very important lines within the next video. Let's add a new item style, so don't forget this comma right here after the container. And then we'll need this one to have a flex of 1 as well. This border width will also be 3. And let's distinguish these items with a different border color of black. So let's put 2 items within our container. The first one is a view with a style of item. And this one we'll simply call item 1. And then we'll have another item within our container, and this one will be item 2. Now you can see we have 2 items within our container by the black bordered items. Now you might be wondering why the parent and the item and the container have different sizes even though they both have a flex of 1. Well, it's true that they both have a flex of 1. However, the items exist next to each other, so their flexes sum up within the container. Their identical numbers give them simply the same rendering length or width. To illustrate this more clearly, let's add a third item with a much larger flex within the container. So let's define a large item style. Once again, don't forget the comma, so large item. This time, let's give a much larger flex. Let's say 3. The border width, again, will be 3. And these borders just simply help us visualize the flexes. And this time, let's say blue. So let's add a third item. So say view. And this one will have a flex of large item, or 3 within our large item. And this text will be item 3. Now you can see our component is much larger for this specific third item. That's because the flex is much bigger. You can think of flexes as fractions within a container. So this one has a flex of 1, this one has a flex of 1, but this one has a flex of 3. So there's an overall space of 5 within the entire container. So as I continue to add more flexes, it'll say, well, this one has a flex of 1, but if I add everything together, it's 5. So this should comprise 1/5. That's how Flexbox and React Native determines the size of each item. The next one also has a size of 1/5, but this one has a flex of 3. So this one's going to take 3/5 of that entire container. So I'm hoping with this illustration that things are starting to become a little more clear with Flexbox. Now let's discuss another very important Flexbox essential, which is FlexDirection. FlexDirection determines how items are laid out, whether top to bottom or left to right by default. So React Native sets our flexes to default in the columnar direction, which is top to bottom. But we can change that behavior to go left to right by setting our flex direction to row. So go ahead and modify the container property to have a flex direction of row. Now, as you can see here, all of our items are now rendering left to right. You can, of course, have one container rendering in the flex row direction with other containers nested that render in the columnar direction. So let's nest 2 children within the large item to see how this works in action. So I'm going to take advantage of our existing item style to create 2 items within our large item. So let's take out this text, add another view with a style of item. Let's give it a text so we can see where it is. And we'll say it's item 3A. Let's add another view as its sibling. And we'll say item 3B. As you can see here, now there are 2 items within our large item that are its children. But they're not in the row direction, they're in that default columnar direction. That's because our large item property, its default flex direction is column. But of course, we can change that as well to row. And now everything is left to right, and this flex direction 3 is split in half. So let's change things back to default. So now that we have a better grasp of flex and flex direction, let's move on to the next video where we discuss 2 very important properties, which is the justify content property and the align items property.